I simulated Trump's policies in Democracy 4, a government simulation game, and this is what happened. Over the last weeks, I have read hundreds of articles about Trump's promises in the campaign and his policies during his 4 years in government. I took notes and I matched his positions with policies available in Democracy 4. Trump supports record funding for the police. I go to the simulation and massively increase funding for the police. Trump wants to reduce the corporate tax. I reduce the corporate tax. Trump likes nuclear energy. I allow widespread expansion of nuclear energy. Overall, I mapped 100 policies that Trump supports in 7 different areas and I fitted it into the simulation. So are you ready? Let's see what happened. Let's now talk quickly about energy and environment. So first of all, a big problem during the whole game was the oil price, the price of oil. So oil price remained very high, which creates problems for the economy because it leads to higher prices and low growth. Here we can see how it remained extremely high. And so this is mostly due to the strength of the dollar. So basically due to GDP, the strength of the dollar was very low. And this is also due to high inflation, which is related to different measures that we took to try to stimulate the economy, but also the debt crisis itself. So to try to solve this in line with Trump's policies and promises, we tried to increase the supply of oil by giving oil drilling subsidy, in line with Trump's drill baby drill philosophy. That should have increased the supply of oil and reduced prices, but while supply did go up a bit, prices remained quite stable, quite high. So in line with Trump's promises, I have also cancelled all kinds of subsidies for renewable energy, and I also cancelled all kinds of microgeneration grants. This has of course led to a massive reduction in the amount of wind and solar based power stations. It has reduced basically from 30% to 10%, a massive decrease, it's huge. And this is also due to the fact that we were giving subsidies to oil drilling to try to increase the supply, which in turn led to making renewable energy less attractive and more expensive. So overall, as we can see here, electricity from renewable energy went down from 20% to 5%, which is insane. It's a huge reduction. Now let's have a look at other kinds of energy and what happened with them. So first of all, let's look at electricity from coal. First, it slightly went up, mostly because of cancelling subsidies for solar and wind, but then it went down, mostly because of making oil very attractive by offering oil subsidies, but also because of nuclear energy. So Trump really likes nuclear energy. He has made several statements in that direction, and he has promised to expand United States nuclear power as a lever against China and Russia's influence in the global nuclear market. He has promised actually to make electricity cheap with hundreds of new power plants and modular nuclear reactors. So in this simulation, I allowed for the widespread expansion of nuclear reactors. And did this have a huge impact because basically the amount of nuclear power stations tripled in 4 years, which is absolutely insane. This made the amount of electricity from nuclear power stations to go up, and therefore it made the price of electricity went down by quite a lot. Price of electricity went down through the whole game, not by a lot, but quite something, over 10%, and this in turn made poverty and inequality go down. Finally, Trump also really likes hydroelectricity. He wishes the United States would use hydroelectric power more to meet its energy demands. He has made several statements in that direction. So in line with those statements, even though it's not a promise, but due to the energy problems that we had, I thought it would be reasonable to create a hydropower expansion project, not with a lot of funding, low funding, but still, as a way to increment electricity generated this way. So this had an impact obviously in terms of increasing electricity generated through hydropower, but it was a small impact. But still, I think it contributed to fossil fuels energy not skyrocketing, and it also had an impact in terms of the price of electricity to be quite low. So overall, even though we cancelled all forms of support for wind and solar, electricity from fossil fuels did not went up by a lot, mostly because of the widespread expansion of nuclear energy and also, to some degree, hydropower. Electricity supply was healthy and electricity prices went down by quite a lot, which is good news for low-income and middle-income people. And now there's the question of what happened with CO2 emissions and the environment overall, so let's have a look at that. So in the beginning, even though we eliminated all kinds of emission controls, CO2 emissions actually went down. But this was mostly due to the GDP going down. So if the economy is doing worse, there's less production, less consumption, and that obviously makes CO2 emissions to go down. After that, however, CO2 emissions started to go up again, and this was mostly due to car usage and also the very low car fuel efficiency, because there were no kind of emission standards and there were no subsidies for electric vehicles. And this was also due to fossil fuels. So either it's oil, coal or natural gas, they had a big impact in terms of increasing CO2 emissions. Then there were some issues like biofuel subsidies or electric car transition that did help a bit to keep the amount of CO2 emissions in check, but still they went up by quite a lot by then. And in terms of the overall environment, the situation started very bad and remained very, very bad through the whole simulation. This is for similar reasons than the CO2 emissions, the use of cars, and also electricity from fossil fuels. Now, I did keep some funding for waste management and recycling, which made the situation slightly better, but overall the situation with the environment was very bad, very precarious. Now let's speak about transport. In line with Trump's promises and positions, I supported car usage, and I also supported traditional cars, that is, cars with internal combustion engines. So first of all, I didn't offer any subsidies for electrical vehicles, but it was interesting because the electric car transition continued, it went up. But this was mostly due to high oil prices and the high level of technology, which created incentives for people to switch to electric vehicles, even if there were no subsidies for that. So the quite high level of electric car transition did help to keep the CO2 emissions in check. I also offered quite high biofuel subsidies. This is something that Trump supports very strongly. Now, to be honest, Trump doesn't support this because of the environmental side of things. He supports this because the production of biofuels, that is, fuels that are created by agricultural products such as corn, does create extra income for farmers. Now, he supports it at least rhetorically because in the past he introduced some changes that made farmers quite mad, but still he's promised to increase biofuel subsidies, so I stick by his word. In terms of overall car usage, it was very interesting because car usage was already very, very high when we started the simulation, but it went up even more to the maximum. This is mostly due to the high investment in road construction, something that Trump has promised. He really favors road construction and the expansion of highways, so this is something that I increased funding for quite a lot, major expansion, even though it's quite expensive. And so here, as we can see, this increases by a lot car usage and it decreases traffic congestion. But see, this is quite interesting because here we can see how building more roads is supposed to reduce traffic congestion, and indeed it went down, but not by a lot. And this is because while building more roads creates less congestion short term, long term it also makes more people use their cars, and using cars in the end is what creates more traffic congestion. So that's why even though we built a lot of roads, a lot of highways, traffic congestion didn't really improve that much. Finally, here we can see how the efficiency of car fuel went down slowly. Of course, in line with Trump's approach to environmental regulation, I didn't allow any kind of emissions limits or emission standards on cars. That's because during his presidency, Trump rolled back emission standards introduced during the Obama presidency. So in line with his approach, I didn't allow for any regulation for car emission standards. Finally, I didn't offer any kind of subsidies or funding for trains and buses, because this is not something that Trump generally supports. I did keep some level of subsidies for school buses, even though I decreased the funding, because this is something that I think Trump would do. And That's why bus usage went down, along with the increase in the use of cars. And also, because of that, rail usage went down, even though by the end, interestingly, it went up again a bit because of rural development grants. So overall, both bus usage and rail usage remained very low, which is in line with reality in the United States, and nothing changed in this regard. Most people just kept using cars. Overall, under Trump, car was the king.